नमस्ते सर, कैसे हैं?
थैंक यू वेरी मच। हाउ आर यू?
मैं बढ़िया। मेरे को किसी महानुभाव ने बोला था कि भारत में 3 ही असली पाकिस्तान के एक्सपर्ट्स हैं और उसमें से आप एक हैं। तो तिलक देवेशर जी, थैंक यू फॉर कमिंग। और ये जो आपकी बुक है, सबको दिखा दूं मैं, पश्तून्स, फैंटास्टिक बुक सर। Thank you so much for writing it. I really enjoyed. Got to know so much about these people that I thought I knew, but you have done a commendable job. Thank you. So can you please explain to our viewers why you chose to write a book on these people, Pashtuns, and who are they?
You see, first of all, मैं वो 3 experts में से बिल्कुल नहीं। I'm student, I'm still learning. I'm very very clear कि this vast ocean. हाँ, इंडिया में 1.2 बिलियन एक्सपर्ट्स हैं। मैं उनमें से एक्सपर्ट,
उनमें से 3 में से आप एक real
I'm
expert.
a student, I'm still learning. Yeah. Now, why I wrote this book? You see, when I was growing up, 2 चीज़ें I knew about the Pashtuns. One was this India's first fairness cream called Afghan Snow. उसकी वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, उसका नाम एक्चुअली Zahir Shah, King Zahir Shah, when he was on a visit to India, somebody presented him this gift hamper and he saw this white cream. He said this reminded him of Afghan Snow. So India's first beauty cream name was Afghan Snow. Second was Rabindranath Tagore's 1892 Kabuliwala, about this Pathan who gets very close to a girl, young girl in Calcutta, because she reminded him of his own daughter. It was very benign. When you saw movies in Bollywood, you know, the Pathan was always a friend of the oppressed, especially of women. So I had a very favorable image, a peaceful image, benign image of the Pashtuns. So when I was in college and I was growing up and started working, the violence in Afghanistan and the Pak-Afghan border shocked me. You know, there was a Soviet invasion, Mujahideen, the civil war, the Taliban. I said, you know, what went wrong with the Pashtuns? The benign image that I had of the Pashtuns, and what happened to them? So I thought I must study them and write a book on this. So when I started writing, of course, other commitments were there, so I couldn't write till now. So that is the reason why I wrote this. Now, what is the book about? You know, the other question. See, I'm looking for answers. Who are the Pashtuns? Where did they come from? What are their social and religious beliefs? What is Pashtunwali? What is the relationship of Pashtunwali with Islam? Then I try and understand the British contact with the Pashtuns for 100 years. The Durrani line, Abdul Ghaffar Khan and the post-partition politics in Pakistan. The developments in Afghanistan up to and including the Soviet invasion, the Mujahideen, the civil war, the rise of the Taliban, the US intervention after 9/11, then the resurgence of the Taliban coming back into power, and the role that Pakistan has played, the dubious role that Pakistan has played in all these developments. And finally, the book also touches upon the strengths and weaknesses of the Pashtun. That if the Pashtuns are ever to find peace and tranquility and break the cycle of war and violence, they have to find answers themselves. They have to come up with their own formulation rather than depending either on the US or on Pakistan or outside. Today, they're polarized. The Pashtuns are polarized. So they will have to get together themselves. So I look at these various issues in my book.
For example, somebody who does not know where they are living in Pakistan and Afghanistan, can you just elaborate that geography where these people are mostly present?
Yeah. You see, traditionally the Pashtun area is stretched from the Indus right up to the Hindu Kush. This was the broad contours of the empire, the first empire set up by Ahmad Shah Durrani in 1747. This is the Pashtun area. Gradually it broke up. First, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he captured Peshawar up to the Khyber Pass and included it in his Sikh empire. The British took over from him and then Pakistan inherited it from Pakistan. So the Pashtuns have been broken up into 2 areas. There is the Pashtuns who are in Afghanistan, where they form the 40% of the population, the largest ethnic group but not a majority, and the Pashtuns in Pakistan, where there are more in number, but the third ethnic minority, ethnic group after the Punjabis and the Sindhis. So they have actually been spread. So the broad area of the Pashtuns, which I talk about, is from the Indus up to the Hindu Kush.
It's very interesting that you also mention in the book that how Karachi is the biggest,
largest Pashtun city in the world, more than Kabul, Peshawar, Jalalabad or Kandahar, because of the migration which has taken place from different parts of NWFP. Also, you see, the geography has played a very critical part in the development of the Pashtuns. Though landlocked, Pashtunistan, as I call it, was the crossroads between South Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East and East Asia. And all the invaders who came had to cross Afghanistan to go to the riches of India. So it became the invasion route. So this meant two things. It was a weakness because it was on the route of the invaders. A strength because Pashtuns then used the mountain areas to defend themselves against every invader. And though every invader tried to conquer the Pashtuns and establish their hold, they were not able to, so it got the name of the graveyard of empires. Because they found that the Pashtuns could not be defeated in the classical sense. They didn't know the concept of defeat. They fought and they withdrew. They knew when to fight, they knew when to hide, they knew when to run.
So they have used throughout the history the geography to their advantage.
Absolutely.
Because nobody knows that geography better than themselves.
And nobody is prepared over the long term to fight in that terrain. The Soviets couldn't do it, the Americans couldn't do it, and they made use of the terrain.
And another interesting thing that you mentioned that they don't know the concept of defeat. Also, their concept of time is also most like Hindus and Indian people, because we also think in not decades or even in centuries, millennia. So even they, like that quote from one of the quotes in your book is that I am a 6,000-year-old Pashtun, 1,000-year-old is Muslim, and 25-year-old Pakistani. He said in 1975. Around
Wali Khan entered that in the National Assembly. So there is a concept of Afghan time. You see, like the British also in the first Afghan war and second Afghan war, quick victory. Then the Afghans, using Afghan time, then they retaliated and devastated the British. In the first Afghan war, only that Major Bryant was one man who struggled, came to Jalalabad. When he was asked what happened to the army, he said, I am the army.
I am the army,
Similarly, in the second Afghan war also, they had quick victories. But then in the Battle of Maiwand, I think it was, the Afghans demolished them. Even with the US, the famous line that you may have the time, but you may have the watches.
But we have the time.
We have the time.
So they have such a huge frame in history. And it's very interesting. For example, that quote of 6,000-year-old Pashtun but 1,000-year-old Muslim. And still if you talk to them, for example, you have written in detail how they can't think beyond their Islamic identity even now. So what is the religion? What was the religion of Pashtuns before Islam came into this subcontinent? And how they reconcile that identity with their current religion? Because Pashtun identity goes back long back in time.
Much before the coming of Islam.
Like thousands of years as that person
So
said.
there's an interesting background. You see, people have done a lot of debate amongst historians on where did the Pashtuns come from. But as far as the Pashtuns are concerned, they trace their origin or genealogies to the conversion of their common ancestor, Qais Abdul Rashid, or Qais bin Rashid, who went to Medina during the lifetime of the Prophet in 622 and was converted by the Prophet to Islam. And then he came back and spread the word of Islam throughout, and then his sons, grandsons, great-great-grandsons, all the Pashtun tribes traced their origin back to Qais Abdul Rashid. And this was documented in India. Jahangir had commissioned this in about 1613. And one Makhzani Afghani, History of the Afghans, by one Nehmatullah, he compiled all the genealogies of the Pashtun tribes. That is an article of faith. They believe that they have no infidel past. They were not forcibly converted. They are the true and the original converts, converted by the Prophet himself.
And because of that, they consider that all their non-Islamic, for example, whatever allegations are made against them, they say, no, we have been converted by the Prophet.
So God will overlook our whatever transgressions are happening over there. But historically, Islam came to present-day Pashtun areas during the time of the Rashidun caliphs and the Umayyad dynasty, the Arabs, came. And it was further spread by the Perso-Turkic kings, Ghazni, Ghori, and things like that. So they took about 4 centuries to convert the whole of Afghanistan because of the mountainous areas. So before that, while Balkh was the first city to become Islamized, in Kabul there was the Hindu Shahi dynasty, in Bamiyan were the Buddhists, and in Ghazni there was a thing called the Zun, a local religious cult was there. And they continued to survive till the late 10th, early 11th century.
So was the dynasty only Hindu Shahi, or the people were also
The
major?
people also, because Islam only came, let's say, even if you take it in the 7th century, prior to that, you see, if you look at the Buddhist influence, after Ashoka converted to Buddhism, he spread Buddhism right up to Kabul and beyond. His stupas of learning, Buddhist learnings, you find in Peshawar, you find in Kandahar, you find all over the place. The Bamiyan Buddhas were built, during this time, and the Chinese, Fahian and Hunsang, when they visited, they found a lot of Buddhist influence. Before that, Chandragupta Maurya, he had spread all the way to Gandhara. In Mahabharata, you have Gandhari coming from Peshawar. It's not Kandahar, but it is Peshawar. So that was a Hindu. Then it became Buddhist, So these religions flourished in this part of the world before they took to Islam.
And even then there was no difference as such, like there was no clear demarcation that Hindu, Buddhist, the current definitions of religion, you have to be classified as such, because in state documents you have to be documented as like that. So how do Pashtuns, for example, they completely reject their religious history beyond pre-Islamic history of religion, but they maintain that tribal identity?
So for them, the tribal identity and Islamic identity are two sides of the same coin. But they also realize that Pashtunwali, and as Pashtuns, they existed for centuries, millennia, before being converted to Islam. So Pashtunwali helps them to make this leap of faith, or to square the circle. I'll give you an example. Mullah Omar refused to hand over Osama Bin Laden either to the US or even to Muslim countries, not on the basis of Islam, but on the basis of Pashtunwali, that I have given him shelter. This whole question of Anamati and refuge, I cannot hand him over. So when the scholars told him, but this is against Islam, he said Pashtunwali. So he, gave preference to Pashtunwali. Likewise, even though they were converted, let's say, by from the Prophet itself, it is a tribal Islam, which continues to have a lot of pre-Islamic practices, which for a modern day Islamist will be total heresy. Visiting shrines, for example,
which is a big thing in Afghanistan.
In fact, we don't realize that the Sufi influence in Afghanistan was very, very strong in this part of the world. One example, Al-Hajweri was born in Ghazni and went and settled in Lahore. Data Darbar is his shrine, which is the biggest and the most venerated shrine in Pakistan, in Lahore. He actually was a Sufi saint from Afghanistan.
So many songs are also there in Cox Studio. And
so they're all, the Sufi influence is very strong. So that continued. That continued till very recently. And for them, whether it's worshipping of shrines, whether it is seeking barakat from saints who are believed to intercede between them and in God, and wearing taweez, it's very common, So they
kind of like Shraddh. Kind of like Shraddh in Hindus.
So they continue to believe in this pre-Islamic, what is called tribal Islam or folksy Islam, and the peers and all that, they accepted it. This is our cultural heritage. So they recognized that they were Pashtuns before they became converted to Muslims, but they squared the circle by saying we are God's chosen people. In fact, recently an Afghan scholar wrote that if God had been human, he would have been a Pashtun. So they have that faith that the day of judgment, God will forgive us for our sins because we are the purest of the Muslims.
Because we were our ancestors were converted directly by
the Prophet.
And can you just elaborate on this Pashtunwali, this code, how they implement it, what are the main... Because somebody who does not know what Pashtunwali is, he might be confused what you are talking about.
So, Pashtunwali is the code of the Pashtuns. It's an unwritten code. Everybody knows what it is, but you won't find any document what it is.
So nobody has tried to document it.
They have written parts of it,
Okay.
but everybody knows what Pashtunwali is.
Because
It
it's
is
subtle
basi-
kind of.
It is that to follow Pashtunwali, to become a Gairatmand person, an honorable person, if you follow all its tenets. The key is honor. Based on the three principles, Zan, Zan, Zameen. Women, gold, wealth, and land. So honor is the most important attribute of Pashtunwali and for the Pashtuns. To be dishonored, as the Pashtun saying goes, a blow for a pinch. So therefore, everybody carries a weapon because the honor has to be defended by individuals. So they carry weapons to show that they are in a position to defend Pashtunwali. Now the three key tenets of Pashtunwali, one is revenge or badal as they call it. That if you are hurt, if you are dishonored, you have to reclaim your honor. Law, modern day law and justice about murder and all just doesn't apply. To regain, because if you don't regain your honor, you will be treated as weak and it will be repeated. So, revenge. Second is melmastia, which is called hospitality. That anybody who comes to your hujra, the place where they meet in the evenings, has to be fed, free. And the bigger the Khan, or more important the person, he will have more generous in his food and shelter which he gives to the people. So this is one way of converting wealth into power. Then you are recognized as somebody who is extremely hospitable. And the third is nanvati, which is refuge. Anybody, even if your enemy, your blood enemy comes and seeks refuge, you cannot deny it to him. You will have to look after him, give him food, and safely escort him out of your territory. You can kill him afterwards. But during this time that he is your guest. So these are the three. Then there are a whole lot of others. There's cousin rivalry, there's bravery. But these are the main elements of Pashtunwali, which all of them add together to become a Gairatmand Pashtun, an honorable Pashtun.
And this lot of infighting, as you said, within the cousins and the family also.
Yeah.
As one of the quotes mentioned that there is a jinnah in every family.
Yeah.
who would rather burn the house rather than let his brother rule it.
Yeah. Or they say that uncle of mine is a infidel.
Yeah.
So that is the cousin rivalry. And you see, again, it is difficult for people to understand, as Ghani Khan in fact put it. We are all equal. We all came up on the same day. We are like rain-fed corn. Hum ekdam, so there is no high or low amongst the Pashtuns.
Okay.
That is achieved. But in terms of descent and being born, they are all equal. So even a poor peasant will put out his hand to shake a king, shake the hand of a king, or offer him his own food. There is no oonch neech over there. And because of that, no one Pashtun will not listen to the other Pashtun. They're best Democrats actually because they're all equal.
Yeah. Actually, this is the feature of tribalistic societies. Like, they tend to be more democratic in the sense that everybody tries to assert their right to...
But not the Baloch, for example. For the Baloch, the Sardars is, way up. But among the Pashtuns, the Sardar is an achievement. It's achieved. The status is achieved through work.
And that is also, interestingly, you mentioned throughout the book that this is achieved with your age.
It used to be earlier, through age, through wisdom, through property and all that. Now with the coming of the Taliban and the Salafists, it has become the younger people have taken to it. So younger people have become amirs, which they couldn't in the older Pashtun tribal system.
Interesting. And for example, there are many contradictions also in Pashtunwali. For example, when it comes to women, you mentioned that no woman is as jealously guarded in the world as Pashtun woman. But there is another tradition of giving your woman in exchange for some settlement for peace. So that's a huge contradiction.
Actually, it's again because of Pashtunwali. As I mentioned, honor is the most critical attribute for the Pashtun. And in honor, the honor of the woman is the most sensitive subject among the Pashtun social order. So guarding the woman becomes extremely important because they believe that the woman is a mother of fighters. If they have to breed well, the woman must be protected and made sure no harm comes to her. But because of badal, because of revenge, blood feuds, that lasts for generations and can wipe out families. So they have come across this manner of settling the blood feud by a thing called swara, where a girl or a woman is given in exchange to settle the dispute. That's why you have this, where Pashtunwali comes in. Now, many people feel that dishonor against a woman is what's called a black tor. It's a black crime. Can only be settled to make it white by blood, by death. But this circumvents that. Of course, it's an inhuman custom to give away, treat a woman as commodity and to for this. But this is what the method that this tribal society has come up with, and that's what it is.
And there are many divisions within Pashtuns in tribal, and that goes back into history. For example, one tribe has ruled for 200 years, and now the another tribe is asserting itself. So, can you explain those dimensions?
Yeah.
Like, what are the major tribes, tribes in the Pashtuns, among the Pashtuns?
So, there are two major rivalries. One is between the Durranis and the Gilzais in southern, in Kandahar. Second is in Waziristan between the Wazirs and the Masuds. Now, the Durrani-Gilzai rivalry goes back right down to the beginning formation of the state. The first sort of empire was the Gilzai Hotki tribe from the Gilzais, Mirbais Hotki. He threw out the Persian Safids and established, but didn't last very long. He was succeeded by the Durrani, Ahmad Shah Durrani. And from 1747, right down till 1978, it was the Durrani, different tribes. The Saddozai then became the Muhammadzai, then the Musaiban. So different among the Durrani confederacy. And the Gilzais were sort of, the Gilzais got their revenge during the PDPA, and amongst the Taliban. Mullah Omar was a Hotki Taliban, same as Mirbais Hotki. So since then, the Gilzais have predominated and the Durranis have taken the backseat. The other rivalry is between the Masuds and the Wazirs, as I mentioned, in Waziristan. Intense rivalry between them. So this shows, so what is happening, a very interesting dynamic today, that the Taliban, the people dominating are these, from the Zadran tribe, Haqqanis. Now, both the Gilzais and the Durranis say that, this is, who are they? Because they come from another confederacy called the Gurgasht. So, I think over the long term, you will see a lot of tension between the Haqqanis and the Durranis and Gilzais. So for the first time, Durranis and Gilzais may actually come together to go after the Zadrans.
So the Taliban are predominantly Gilzais.
So first of all, Pashtun. Within the Pashtuns, Gilzais. But they also have Durrani, like for example, Mullah Baradar.
But historically, they see that Durrani Empire.
Yeah, that lasted for 230
years.
Yeah.
So that was started with Ahmad Shah Durrani, Panipat Third War, the same person, right?
Yeah.
And then they see that the regime in tribal sense has changed now with the Taliban coming in.
Because the Taliban were largely from the Gilzai confederacy. And they are also the Hotki tribe. So, and now Zadrans are dominating, which are from the Eastern Confederacy, which were never the rulers, which were, not regarded very highly by either the Durranis or the Gilzais. So there's an interesting dynamic over there.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that, for example, you mentioned one of the reasons why there are so many raids out of Afghanistan, out of these Pashtun areas, because it's a landlocked region. So we see that Nadir Shah was also accompanied by Durrani, and he sacked Delhi, and then he went back, and then he came back as ruler himself, and then he sacked the Delhi again. So this relationship that starts with a very bad image of Afghans, for example, among the large masses of India, that historical relationship. But when we see in 20th century, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, that's a completely different person, completely different movement he tries to run, like non-violence and Gandhian principles, so committed. Like how that found traction there. It's very interesting in a society like this, which has so much violence usually. How did it find so much traction?
So there are two questions you're asking. One is about Durrani and his raid, other about Ghaffar Khan and non-violence. So let me answer the first. You see, before Ahmad Shah Durrani, there were 3 Afghan Pashtun dynasties that ruled in Delhi. There were the Gilzais, there were the Lodhis, and there were the Suris, Sher Shah Suri. So they assimilated and settled in India. Durrani came as a raider because he needed loot to keep his empire together. You see, the problem of Afghanistan throughout history, even till today, is that they do not have enough internal resources for governance.
Which is also true today.
It's true today because they're all depending on foreign funds. So, they want the US to unfreeze funds, the UN to come, other people to come and donate. Similarly, under the communists, Soviet Union was bailing them out. Before that, it was the British. Karzai and Ghani were dependent on US aid.
And you can't have the internal tax system so much that people will revolt against you.
Yeah, because this is again, we call it a weakness or a strength or whatever, but this is the reality. That it is the tribes who have set up or created the state, not the other way around. And the tribes hate to be taxed. There is a distinction between a Kalang tribe and a Nang tribe. Kalang is that which accepts taxation, and a Nang is which does not accept taxation. So Ahmad Shah Durrani found that if he is to stabilize his empire, he needs money. He can't ask his tribes, he can't tax them beyond a point. So he went in for raiding Delhi. He carried out 8 expeditions against Delhi. But
when I was reading that, I thought that what if Marathas were, if they knew this history and his compulsion, they could have just bribed him, maybe. That would have helped.
But this is this is hypothetical.
Yeah, but
you can't.
Very interesting to think.
So the thing about Durrani, he didn't set up an empire in Delhi. He restored the Mughals and he went back. He came back and he went back. Unlike the Khiljis, Lodhis and the Suris. So that was the difference. Now this played out during the freedom struggle. The Ghaffar Khan you mentioned. Now Ghaffar Khan was very popular in India because he was part of the Congress. The Muslim League could get no traction in NWFP. They lost the 37 elections, they lost the 46 elections. Because for the Pashtuns, they had strong memories of the Pashtun-Mughal rivalry. And so they did not trust the Indian Muslims. They did not think that the Indian Muslims would be important for them. Therefore, it was a Congress government that kept winning elections in NWFP, which has a 96% Muslim population. Because the Pashtuns, even though they were Muslims, found no traction with the Muslim League. And later on, of course, there were circumstances in which why the 47 elections or referendum was different. So that is as far as this aspect of Durrani and his relationship with India is concerned. Coming to Ghaffar Khan, you see, Ghaffar Khan came to non-violence through the Quran. He was a very deeply religious man. He had read the Quran and he said, it preaches non-violence, it preaches patience. And then linked up with Gandhiji and both combined to project. So people found it very strange that amongst the people who are considered the most violent in the world. And Ghaffar Khan used to say that only a person who has been violent will appreciate non-violence. And he realized that what was hitting or destroying Pashtun society was his badal, this revenge. So he said you have to put an end to this and you have to preach non-violence. So all the Khudai Khidmatgars, the organization that is set up, all swore to be non-violent. Until today, the Awami National Party, which is led by his grandson Asfandiar Wali, have forsaken violence. Even though Taliban have attacked them, the TTP has attacked them, they've killed about 700-800 of their people. They have not retaliated violently. It's an article of faith. Non-violence is an article of faith in them. So that was the kind of training that Ghaffar Khan had given them through Wali Khan and now Asfandiar Wali. And now Asfandiar Wali's son, Aimal Wali, who is sort of coming to the fore.
Also, the society has also, the Afghan society has also gone under a huge transformation in the last 40 years due to Russian invasion and the rise of Taliban. For example, as you mentioned, that from Sufism to Salafism. So what kind of changes in the society that Salafi ideology has brought into the Pashtun society and what is its impact has been on Afghanistan, Pakistan and the broader politics of subcontinent?
You see, it's really been tragic for the Pashtuns. 40 years, as you mentioned, Pashtun society has been rent asunder. Two things. Largest refugee population was as a result of the Soviet invasion, as a result of the Taliban. Internally displaced people, when the Pakistan army carried out operations in Waziristan or in Swat, internally displaced people, about 1 million to 2 million. So once you go into refugee camps, the entire structure sort of breaks down. So one was that. Second, the people who are killing are Pashtuns. Those being killed are Pashtuns. It is the Taliban were Pashtun. Most of the Mujahideen parties, 6 out of 7 were Pashtun. And they were in turn killing Pashtuns. Pashtun children have been targeted, like in that Peshawar school attack, and the killings continue. So Pashtun society has been absolutely brutalized and rent asunder. And 2 other factors. First, when the Soviet Jihad, whole lot of fighters came from Saudi Arabia and brought, through Saudi funding, they brought Wahhabism, and they set up madrasas which imparted Wahhabi training to the Afghan refugee children. And Pashtun society earlier was Deoband influence, infused with a large amount of Sufism. Therefore, these various practices. In fact, Mullah Omar, right till the end, used to visit every week the grave of his teacher Haji Baba, and used to visit various shrines in Kandahar because the Sufi influence was strong. But over 20 years of fighting with Wahhabi influence coming in, gradually the Deobandi philosophy got infused with Wahhabism, and you had a strange admixture of what is happening in the Taliban phenomena. Second, the Tablighi Jamaat, began entries into, Zia was a great proponent of Tablighi Jamaat. They made entry into NWFP and in FATA, and they preached the Salafi philosophy. And Jamaat Ulema Islam, Fazlur Rahman, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban all propagated this. So from all different sides, the society was rent asunder, tribal structure broke down, Wahhabi influence coming in, and the Tablighi Jamaat. So all this has radicalized Pashtun society to a large extent. And the impact is that the tribal structure has broken down. The traditional leaders, the white peers, the Maliks, a lot of them have been killed. And these new Tablighi Amirs, who have both political capital and religious capital, they all call themselves Mullah Omar, Mullah Barada. They are not
officially mullahs.
They are not officially mullahs.
They are half mullah or 1/3 mullah or whatever.
Yeah. So they have now come to the fore. So this is deeply impacted. So if Pashtun society is to be restored or to go back to a peaceful manner, this element will have to be somehow fixed. And then the other thing is there have been 2 institutions in the Pashtun society, the Hujra and the Masjid. The Hujra is where in the house or in the village, they are one place like a clubhouse where people get together in the evening, smoke hookahs, talk about the day's development, about crops, about water. And they keep an eye on the mullah. Ki agar ye galat kaam kar raha hai, they will get rid of him. And the mullah was always subservient to the Hujra because he was dependent on them for protection and for finances.
Yes.
In the Soviet Jihad, the US and Saudi Arabia pumped so much of money into the mullahs to get recruits to go and fight that the mullah became an independent institution. So the masjid assumed more importance over the Hujra. This balance will again have to be restored if you have to move ahead and reclaim the space for Pashtun society.
Has there been some impact on Pashtunwali as a result of this?
You see, in some places yes, in some places no. Where the Pashtuns have become detribalized, for example, in Peshawar or in other places, it is less, but it is still there. People hark back, especially these 3 things: revenge, hospitality, and refuge. Other elements will break down. For example, the TTP killing children. All Pashtuns hate it because this is not part of Pashtunwali. This is not a Gairatmand Pashtun. This is not a thing which a Pashtun does. So, like even talk about women, the Pashtuns have always been conservative about women, but they've not been radical and so fundamentalist as what the Taliban are doing.
And for example, Malala Yousafzai, also a Pashtun.
Yeah.
And what was the reaction of the larger Pashtun society to her treatment? First, and second, that Yousafzai is basically son of Yusuf.
It's a big clan. It's a Durrani.
Yeah. So that is also interesting because one, like genealogy wise, if you trace it back, it is said to be traced back to Jews, right?
So that again is a controversial thing.
Yeah.
That is controversial because some people claim that this is one of the 10 lost tribes of the Jews.
Yes, right. Yeah.
No Pashtun, especially not the Taliban, will ever accept it.
Definitely not.
But this is one of the things which historians talked about. People in Israel have written about this. Some amount of DNA testing has been done, but nothing conclusive. But yes, it is son of Joseph. Joseph, son of Yusuf. So there was a lot of reaction that you don't do this. Only where near the adultery, where a woman is accused or suspected of adultery, then she and the boy have given the option of either you get married or face stoning and death. So the treatment meted out to her was totally unlike, is not part of Pashtunwali.
In this, you mentioned how Tablighi Jamaat ka kitna influence badha, and the main role was played by Zia-up-Haq.
Started off there, but of course it's more contemporary than Zia died after 88.
And we think that was a larger Islamism project to infuse Islam into the society of every Pakistani. But could this be a result of Pakistan's project of decreasing the influence of tribalism in Pashtun society, because that is a large population in Pakistan and that could be a national security threat for them? So influence them and inject Islam more into the society, into the Pashtun society, which happened in the last 30-40 years. Was that a national project for Pakistani state, or just normal Islamization of the by the rulers?
See, Zia had 2 or 3 objectives. First, he was a pariah because of hanging Bhutto, not listening to the world, not holding elections. So he perceived the Soviet invasion in 1979 as a God-sent opportunity for him. He said he will now become the champion against communism. USA will have to come and support him. So that was his immediate thing. But he also had a larger objective. Pakistan has always feared Pashtun, this Afghan irredentism and Pashtun nationalism, Pashtunistan, the thing which was raised by Ghaffar Khan. So he found that this is an excellent opportunity to finish this once and for all by changing Pashtun nationalism, Pashtun identity from nationalism to a religious identity. So he started, when these Mujahideen, he supported only the Islamist parties. And there also, and he preached pan-Islamism, encouraged people from Saudi Arabia and all over the Middle East to come and fight. So gradually the character of the Pashtuns changed, became pan-Islamic, and nationalism became suppressed. But Zia didn't just stop here. He, in fact, to finish the whole idea of Afghan irredentism, he wanted to install Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, the most radical of the Mujahideen parties, in Kabul, then set up a federation between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And he told a commentator that his aim was also to take this to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, even to Turkey and to Iran, and to set up a huge Muslim power bloc. Unfortunately, his successors found that instead of the Pashtuns coming to power in Kabul after the Soviets withdrew, it was the Tajik, Burhanuddin Rabbani and Ahmad Shah Massoud. So that project failed. Then they capitalized on this new force that came up in Kandahar, the Taliban, led by Mullah Omar, and by supporting the Taliban, they were able to fulfill their project of pan-Islamism. And so they thought that Pashtun nationalism is now dead and we feel secure. But they didn't realize that an Afghan, a Pashtun, is nothing if he's not a nationalist. Pakistan felt that the Pashtun, or the Taliban, will accept the Durrani line. Recognized as an international border. If you talk about the Durrani line, I'll tell you the background of it. But no, even the Taliban in their first avatar and Taliban in this 2.0 have not accepted the Durrani line. In fact, they have uprooted parts of the fence. You would have read about it.
Recently.
They have called the issue unresolved, and that is divides brothers. So that project of Pakistan to have the Durrani line accepted has not come to fruition. Similarly, the TTP, which also was initially a religious, wanted to establish Sharia, is now talking about an independent area of FATA, where they want to establish. And they are also now gradually moving towards a nationalist perspective. Now, whether there's a tactic or they actually believe in it, I don't know. Time alone will tell. But there are these, stirrings of Pashtun nationalism, which Pakistan had thought had been totally suppressed. So it's a very interesting dynamic. We'll have to wait and watch how it actually plays out.
It's also a very uncomfortable situation between the Pakistani state and the Pashtuns living in Pakistan. For example, it started with Musharraf, kind of meddling in their affairs and trying to go there, send the army units. That those kind of incidents happened, and the society was there. Like a lot of pushback was there. So that they are trying to do those kind of meddling in their internal affairs. So that anger is also there in the Pashtun society. But on the other hand, if we see that, as you mentioned, Karachi is such a huge city for them, similarly Peshawar. So the society is also very well integrated. They are very much present in the Pakistani army, society, also cricket team, of course. So how do you see that? Because going forward, this will be a huge issue for the Pakistan to resolve, and for others, its enemies to also rake it up. For example, we always talk about Balochistan as a potential fault line, but nothing could be bigger fault line than this.
Yeah, that's true. So this is a major issue, that because the Pashtuns are very well integrated into the Pakistani system, whether it's the army, whether it's economics, you mentioned Karachi, and in different ways also, they are very well integrated. Yet you cannot deny the fact that there are a lot of commonality between the Pashtuns on the other side of the Durrani and the Pashtuns over here, whether it is religion, whether it's language, whether it's culture, whether it is family ties, whether it is Pashtunwali.
So it's very common for to intermarry there.
Yes, and to keep going across. People keep going across this fence
without any border.
Yeah, this fence has become now a problem. So every now and then you have demonstrations at Turkham or at the Chaman border. But so these links are there, and various governments in Afghanistan have provoked or used the Pashtunistan issue, like when Mohammad Dawood was the Prime Minister and later on the President. He raised this issue. They would have Pashtunistan Day, they issued a stamp, they would have schools where they would sing Pashtunistan songs, and so on and so forth. Because no Pashtun in reality has accepted having lost Ahmad Shah Durrani's territories which stretched up to the Indus. If you ask an Pashtun, where is your area? He said up to Attock. Hindustan, Afghanistan. So they are weak. They cannot do nothing about it. But you never know, a wild swan event maybe just around the corner, or what happens in the future. But this instinct, this feeling of one. So there is this famous slogan that I quoted in the book, Pashtun slogan, La Robar Yo Afghan, which means lowlands of Pakistan and the highlands of Afghanistan are one. So they still have this feeling. And the Pashtun the Hafiz movement, which has come up as a reaction to the army operations and displacement of Pashtuns, have raised this slogan that, we are one, we have a common thing. So these are, I would say, green shoots which are coming up. How it develops, we'll have to wait. If the Pakistan army does what it did in East Pakistan, or if it does what it did in Balochistan, then the reaction will be far more severe.
Balochistan, yeah.
Because the Pakistan army only, as they say, that if you only have a hammer, everything looks to you like a nail.
Yeah.
You want to hammer it in.
Because still 60%, I think, of the Pakistani army consists of Punjabis.
Yeah. Maybe 65.
65.
Yeah.
So that will be a huge tussle within the Pakistan itself.
So initially when Musharraf sent in the army over there, this was the problem.
They sent the Pashtun soldiers.
They refused to fight, in the frontier corps, because they knew that if they kill another Pashtun, that blood feud will last for how long?
Yeah, that's Pashtunwali comes into the picture.
Yeah.
TTP is a big player. Tehreek Taliban Pakistan, which is Pakistani Taliban, which we often say see in media also. So that, if we look at that and Taliban, अफगानिस्तान का तालिबान और पाकिस्तान का तालिबान, उसमें थोड़ा सा एक सिमिलरिटी ये दिखता है कि जो तालिबान का जो अफगानिस्तान का तालिबान है, दैट emphasizes more on religion, Islam, because of Salafist ideology. और जो तहरीक तालिबान पाकिस्तान है, that is kind of trying to focus more on the tribalism. पश्तून नेशनलिज्म पे थोड़ा उनका ज़्यादा जोर है. तो ये कितना सही है और इसका क्या इम्पैक्ट होने वाला है? इन दोनों का रिलेशनशिप कैसा है, अफगानिस्तान और पाकिस्तान के तालिबान का?
You see, Taliban may be come as religious, but they are basically Pashtuns. They have managed to mask the Pashtun tribal identity under the garb of religion. That we are pan Pashtun. We don't believe in tribal borders or tribal identity. We are more into religious. But at the end of the day, they are a Pashtun tribal force. Where the relationship is concerned, I think the relationship is very strong. Simply because when the Taliban were in trouble after 2001 American bombing, they escaped into Waziristan, where the people who today are the TTP gave them refuge, gave them shelter, protected them. Today the TTP needs help. So when they seek refuge in Afghanistan, the Taliban are not going to. Taliban have told Pakistan, at best we will facilitate talks with the TTP. उससे आगे हम नहीं जा सकते. You talk to them, it is your problem, you sort it out. Call your ulamas and sort out the problem. But don't expect us to take action. These are our brothers. They gave us shelter and refuge when we needed it. Today they need it. So they will not fall apart.
And you mentioned Durrani line, which seems to be the most porous border. So what conditions do you think would need to be in place for this Durrani line to disappear?
You see, this provokes a question, is the Durrani line actually there? It may be there from Pakistan's side. Yeah. You see, the Durrani line, when it was signed in 1893, demarcated spheres of influence. And there is a host of British writing statements to Parliament, minutes of this from Delhi, from Calcutta to home in London and vice versa, which states this is spheres of influence. Yeah. We have no control, we have no sovereignty, neither do we want it. But once Pakistan was created, the British wanted Pakistan to be a strong state because they felt that their objectives against the Soviet Union would be better served by a strong Pakistan than by India. So that's why they made sure there was a referendum which was held in the NWFP area. If it had left to the assembly, where there was a Congress majority, quite likely it would have voted for accession to India. So they had got rid of the verdict, got rid of the electoral results, and the referendum. Similarly, they then declared it's an international border. All along till 47, it was spheres of influence. Similarly, they did in Kalat. You know, they first encouraged Kalat's independence. So Jinnah signed this on August 11th statement with Khan of Kalat accepting his independence. By October, the British were telling him, "Ye band karo, you take over Kalat."
Legally, to clear hai. Like it's not a. It was never meant to be a border.
Yeah,
but abhi to ho gaya hai.
No. So then the other thing is, the last treaty between the British India and Afghanistan is the 1921 Treaty of Kabul, right? Which clearly states that this treaty is in force for 3 years. And either side can rescind it with 12 months notice.
Yeah.
ठीक है. उसके बाद after 47, the Pakistan has not raised or tried to formalize any other treaty. 1949, the Afghan home government hosted a Loya Jirga, which is considered the highest decision-making body, which rescinded 21 treaty, which rescinded the Durrani line, which rescinded the Treaty of Gandamak. So all this NWFP or KPK today and Northern Balochistan and FATA, they rescinded all that. So, as far as the Afghans are concerned, and as far as even the Taliban are concerned, no Afghan government has accepted the Durrani line or rescinded 1949 Loya Jirga decision. So, unke liye, so actually what exists today is the Indo-Afghan border. It is not even the Pakistan-Afghan border. Because there is no formal treaty which Pakistan, or even no letters exchanged on this particular issue. So, Pakistan realizes this. You see, if you are short of your international border, why should you worry that a weaker state accepts it or not? They tried thrice during Taliban 1.0. You accept or recognize the Durrani line. They said, we can't, we're an interim government. Similarly, now the Taliban says, we cannot. We're an interim government. No, Taliban will never do it. That is Pakistan's worry because they know this is a weak spot. This is a spot that can be exploited if there is a strong Afghan government.
And because Afghanistan is landlocked and you have that whole region from upper Afghanistan to lower Pakistan and then Balochistan also, and then you go to sea. So their landlocked problem might get solved if this whole region becomes an independent nation. How that much is a possibility given that Balochistan is also a fault line?
Yeah. So, that is again very hypothetical. You can't see which way how things will develop, if they will develop at all.
I mean,
but even
Abdul
Rahman in his autobiography had said that he wants a portion of Balochistan so that Afghanistan gets access to the sea. That's a long-term thing. It's right now I think it's an imagination. It's certainly not on the ground as such.
And Abdur Rahman, the old one, what's his name? The second person who was very influential in forging
Amir
the
Abdur
name.
Rahman.
Yes.
Iron Amir.
Yeah. After Durrani, he was the second person.
Yeah.
Durrani is considered as the father of Pashtunistan. But this person was actually the person who actually went and tried to forge the whole
Afghan nation.
Yeah, Afghan nation in the modern sense. So can you talk about that? Like what are his contribution and the in unfinished project? For example, some areas that he could not integrate into the Afghan society and couldn't bring that peace, long lasting peace that has continued to fester till today. For example, the Taliban and the fight between in the northern region. What's his name?
There, what he tried to do, that he wanted to have the Afghan nation, but based on the Pashtun confederacy. Now, he was comfortable that in the south, east and west, you had Pashtun population. No problem. In the north, there were Turkoman, there were Hazara, there were Uzbeks, there were Tajiks, who had affiliation with Central Asia. So he said this is a weak point as far as he was concerned. So he moved the Pashtun population, relocated Pashtun population, especially the Gilzais, to settle in these areas so that there were Pashtun pockets as a defensive measures. Now, I think as far as the Taliban are concerned, Pashtunization of the north has actually helped them because they have Pashtun pockets. So Panjshir may be a holdout, there may be other areas, but you have Pashtuns all around them. So that actually is paying dividends today. What Amir Abdur Rahman had done a century ago.
Yes. But there is still like Panjshir mein.
So that is a political issue. You see, they have not accepted Taliban as rulers of Afghanistan. It is not that they are talking about their own secessionism or they don't want to be part of Afghanistan. They are against the government of Afghanistan as constituted today.
So they are very clear that we are part of Afghanistan.
Oh, yes.
We must be the actual.
They want an inclusive government, a democratic government which is elected, which the Taliban will not countenance.
And for example, in Pakistan society, you explain that there are three kind of Pashtuns. One are the Pashtunized Islamists, and then Pashtun nationalists, and there is another section of people. So what would you say the percentages, or how much, what is the percentage of the people of these three groups in Pakistan? Because that will ultimately going to determine whether the Durrani line stays or the border or the Pashtun nation comes into the force.
See, they're not frozen. They're not frozen in time. Ki wohi category. I think soon after partition and thereafter, Pashtun nationalists would have been a larger number. After the Soviet invasion, the Islamists number would have increased. Statists, I think, have probably remained the same because they got the fish and loaves of office in the army or economic benefits or in trade. So it is not a frozen category. It keeps changing with the change in time and developments.
And lastly, we can talk about the fact that Pashtuns, for example, they, as you said, they don't know the concept of defeat. And another code in the Pashtunwali is basically feud, long-lasting feud and revenge. So the first thing that comes to mind is the invasion against Prithviraj Chauhan. जब वो हुआ था तो पहली बार हरा दिया, उसके बाद he comes back and then he defeats him, kills him. So can that be linked to that psyche in Afghan society? And of course our weakness is that we are never एक बार हरा दिया ठीक है, अब हमको तैयारी करना नहीं आता है. Like
he didn't kill Prithviraj Chauhan initially. He captured him. He blinded him.
Achha.
You see, you can't judge those events from today's standards. I think Prithviraj Chauhan was part of a system where chivalry, where forgiveness were the norms that he lived his life with. Unfortunately for him, Gauri did not believe in those standards. I think we have learnt a lot. We have moved ahead. So, aaj wo, it will be more than an eye for an eye.
आप मानते हैं ऐसा?
हाँ, बिल्कुल. अभी ऐसी कोई बात नहीं. There's no such forgiveness. We will not turn the other cheek. That's for sure. And also, Gauri reading, you see, like Mahmud of Ghazi, they were all plunderers basically. Wanted money. So he's been thwarted once. He realized Prithviraj Chauhan's weakness. So then he came the second time.
Hmm.
Revenge, I don't know whether it's linked to revenge or, finding an opportunity.
And you also go into very big details that the kind of void that was created after the Russian invasion, and that in that void the Taliban came into being, and how that was supported by Pakistan, and in turn, like they Taliban, how they took the Deobandi ideology to extreme. Can you elaborate on that?
So, Taliban rose in a specific context. Once the Soviets had left, the Mujahideen, instead of coming together and forming a government, started fighting amongst each other, and they broke up into ethnic groups. So, in Kandahar, the localized situation, it was a local situation, where different warlords have set up different checkpoints. They were looting people, extorting money, raping women, raping boys, taking away their property. So some people protested, help us. So a group of people got together and they said, we must do something about it. So it was a local thing to break the local warlords, the local checkposts. And from that small thing, when they found success and more people joined them, then they managed to get this armory near Spin Buldak, then they got Kandahar, and then it's expanded. And then Pakistan realized that ye to Hikmatyar project has failed, so why not try out this project? So Nasirullah Babar was the Home Minister of Benazir Bhutto's government. He was the person who realized their potential. And that's how Pakistan's support to the Taliban. So the Deobandi, you see, they were Deobandi, as I mentioned, Mullah Omar, a strong Sufi influence. But 20-25 years of war, with the Wahhabi influence coming in, so the Taliban ideology became infused with Wahhabism. Despite this, people realize that the Sharia or the Islam that is followed by the Taliban has no match anywhere else in the world. And when the Al-Azhar trained Egyptian ulema came to Afghanistan to plead with Mullah Omar to don't destroy the Bamiyan Buddhas, it is un-Islamic to destroy the Bamiyan Buddha, they found that their knowledge of Islam was extremely poor. They did not know Arabic, they did not know any theological arguments, they could put forward no theological arguments as why this thing should be destroyed. So it is a very unique combination of Sharia, of Islam, of Wahhabism, of Deobandi, Sufi practices, which has no replication anywhere else in the world. So it's their own very peculiar thing. And then there is Pashtunwali. So, it's a very complex...
Yeah. And when Osama Bin Laden must have come here, he would have realized, like, "Arey, ye to kaun sa Islam hai?"
So they objected to Mullah Omar's visiting graves of his teacher and going to shrines and all that. That was, they said, this is shirk, this is polytheism. So Mullah Omar said, ye Pashtunwali hai.
Chalne do.
But over the years, when more and more Wahhabi influence came, then they also became anti-Sufi. Then, anti-Shia crept in. So a lot of distortions started taking place, which were not there earlier. See, Afghanistan has never been an extremist society. The conservative, very conservative, but not extremist, not radicalized. But they have got radicalized over the disruption, the refugees, in 40 years of fighting, and this Wahhabi influence that I talked about. So this happened over the last 40 years.
What do you think of their attitudes? For example, the Afghan Pashtuns and the Pakistani Pashtuns. What is their difference in their attitudes towards India?
See, in Afghanistan and the Pashtuns, a very warm thing towards India because of the development work we've done. And India does not have an agenda in Afghanistan.
Historically also, they think that India
it's a civilization, it's a people-to-people contact. And we do, unlike Pakistan or any other country, have an agenda that we want a friendly government which is dependent on us. We have no agenda. We are doing work for the people. All our developmental assistance for the people. Among the Pakistani Pashtuns, because they looked upon suspiciously by the Punjabis, ye to Congresi hain. They are all, they were supporters of India. So they are a bit cautious, but in their hearts of hearts, they hark back to Ghaffar Khan and his relationship with India.
Even the Pakistani Pashtuns.
Even the Pakistani Pashtuns. They have this, you see, the radicalization and the anti-India, anti-Hindu propaganda is in Punjab.
Okay.
Less amongst the Sindhis, Baloch or the Pashtuns. I'm not saying it is totally not there.
So there is hierarchy of hate.
Absolutely. Punjabi Musliman is the most rabidly anti-India, anti-Hindu. Because of what he's taught. You see, in the textbooks, right from the primary school onwards, the Punjabi Musliman is taught to hate the India and the Hindus, the Christians and the Jews. The Pashtuns have a broader sort of a perspective. I mean, I will not say broader in the Indian sense, but certainly broader than the Punjabi. Similarly, the Sindhi, similarly the Baloch.
Maybe because Punjabi Muslims in Pakistan, they consider the Pakistan project to be there. Like they have owned it. They have a huge stake in the army, business and everything.
The Pakistan project was the Maharaja project.
Yeah, but eventually they have
in
come to own it.
Muslim League was not even in power in Punjab.
Yeah.
It was a coalition government of Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims. Muslim League was not in power. So Punjabis are latecomers. Of course, they've embraced the Pakistan project.
Because they were in majority.
They found that there's a lot of, you see, when bulk of the migration took place from Punjab, the Hindus and Sikhs migrated. Properties were taken by Punjabis. By Punjabis who were already there and the Punjabi refugees. For them, they have a stake in making sure that partition is cemented. So the hatred for India also comes. You see, 25% of the population of Punjab, earlier it was about 65-35, 65 Muslims, 35 Hindus and Sikhs. When that left en masse, you had about 95-98% of the population becoming Muslim. Then who do they compete or fight with against other Muslims? Somebody has written this, that if the Hindus and Muslims had stayed on, Pakistan would never have been such a radicalized country.
That's very
food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at India, Indian Muslims, and compare it to the Pakistani Muslims, that might be a separate project. But for example, if Pashtun nationalists came to you for some suggestion, what would you say to them? What should the Pashtun nationalists should do?
Look, I am an academic now. I'll give them say, "Meri kitab padho."
And that will be our recommendations also. Pashtuns, fantastic book. Everybody should read. Thank you so much, sir. And currently, I am reading the Balochistan book of yours, and I have to read other 2 books also. So this is 4th book, right?
This is my 4th book, yes.
Enjoying a lot. So hopefully on Balochistan we can do another episode sometime.
Sure.
Is there any other project that you have in pipeline?
Right now I'm focused in sort of publicizing this book, educating people, and I'll start in January. I'll got a couple of subjects in mind.
Great.
Let's see what I'll do. Thank you very much for having me and a very interesting discussion.
It's really an honor and privilege to be having you in the studio. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.